Week 6 is upon us, and we are coming at you guys with a couple more trade targets, a couple more moves that we are making in our fantasy football leagues, going out and purchasing some underperforming players. This is how we like to make incremental profits on our fantasy teams. I'm sure you guys have a lot of injuries. I'm sure you're looking for upgrades, probably have some overperforming players if you're 4-1 or 5-0 or whatever. So this is the best time to be proactive and go out and buy those players. So Danny, I'll let you kick things off. We're going to go through five total trade targets that we're going after, and then a couple sells that we're going to be potentially using to go after those guys.
Yeah, and my first buy is going to be CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. And we're actually talking about this off camera. Context matters. Like if the guy who drafted CeeDee Lamb at the 101, the 102, the 103 in your league still hasn't budged on that valuation, it's probably unlikely you're going to be able to get Lamb. I'm not going to go out there and say every single person can go out there and trade for Lamb. However, what I am saying is if the person in your league is looking at that he's a low-end wide receiver one right now, maybe concerned going forward and values him instead of a guy that I think should be a high first-round pick rest of the season in my rankings to a guy that's maybe more of a mid-end first-round pick, that's where I'm going to be buying. Again, we disagreed on this. He is still my 101 rest of the season. When I'm looking at the projection of CeeDee Lamb in this offense, there is so much meat left on the bone because when you're looking at just the overall situation, the Cowboys are currently number 2 in pass attempts per game, and their defense right now is missing their 2 best players. They are going to continue passing the football, especially knowing that while we did see Rico Dowdle have his breakout game in the NFL this year, this is a pass first, pass second, pass third offense, and Dak Prescott is going to be the one with the ball in his hands winning them games. And the craziest context of Lamb's season so far is that everybody knows he's not playing his best football right now, but when you're looking at his splits in the first half versus second half of games, again, there's one game where obviously against the Baltimore Ravens, he got benched in the fourth quarter. There's a couple other games where the game was kind of out of the strap. People understand that, but when you actually look at the numbers, 353 of his 378 seasonal yards this year have come in the first half of games, and he's still a top 12 wide receiver. What I'm looking at is once they start figuring out, I don't know if it's holdout from camp, maybe some timing issues with him and Dak Prescott, whatever the case may be, once he settles into this offense, we saw last year him not only be the number 1 overall player in fantasy, it wasn't even close. The guy was averaging nearly 28 PPR points per game. So the way I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb right now is people are going to focus on the overall numbers. He's only averaging like 75 yards per game. You know, maybe he's just not the receiver that we pegged him to be coming into the year. My thesis on Lamb still remains intact. And as soon as they can figure it out in the second half, how to get him continually involved like they do in the first, like I said, 353 yards in 5 games in the first half is absurd. This guy's averaging on pace over 1,300 yards in a season just off of his first half numbers right now. So point blank, I'm viewing this as a situation where they're going to start to connect in the second half. This is going to start to look more closer to what we saw last year. And on top of that, in the first few games, you mentioned this off of camera as well, but teams are focused on, okay, we got to take CeeDee Lamb out. Second half of the games, that's what we've seen. The Cowboys' ancillary pieces in that stretch have looked a lot more appealing when you have to game plan as an opposing defense rather than the projection that they had coming to the year. Rico Dowdle, obviously, like I said, just had his best game. Jalen Tolbert showing that even if you take out CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Tolbert can produce on his own right. Jake Ferguson suddenly developing into one of the best tight ends in the NFL. But at the end of the day, the number 1 player on this offense will still always be CeeDee Lamb on an offense, like I said, that is throwing the ball nearly 40 times per game with Dak Prescott, who is currently leading the league in passing yards, has 8 passing touchdowns in 5 games. And this is an offense, like I said, that will need to rely upon their passing attack in their next stretch of games that they have. They're facing against the Lions, the 49ers, the Falcons. These are must-win games for this team. And without their 2 best defensive players, I view this as the onus has to fall on Dak and CeeDee to get this done.
Yeah, my disagreement on Lamb being a buy necessarily is that I actually do view him as like a mid first round player if we redrafted today. It's not necessarily that I think, like, because there's going to be stupid people in people's leagues everywhere that, and you could see some of the trades going down for CeeDee Lamb. Like if you're selling him for Chris Godwin, Dontavian Wicks, and Alan Lazard, like you don't deserve to have CeeDee Lamb on your team. Terry McLaurin, JSN, and Jerome Ford, like obviously if you can buy CeeDee Lamb for what I would consider to be like 70 cents on the dollar going for like back end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 price tags, then obviously go and purchase CeeDee Lamb. My thing is that I think he probably is more so behind Jamar Chase, behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, behind Justin Jefferson, simply because he just isn't playing at a high enough level like those other guys are playing. There's a reason I don't have to go on a 3-minute diatribe about Jamar Chase's excuses this season, because he's actually producing. And of course, in week 3, we talked about him as a trade. We talked about him as a trade target in week 3, but he's already kind of made good on that commitment. And now he's just like each of these guys every week has a play where you're just like, these guys are so freaking good. And I'm not seeing this guy is so freaking good from CeeDee Lamb this year. What I'm seeing from CeeDee Lamb is the offense is 18th in yards per play right now. They're 14th in points per game. They're having these up and down game environments where they look good one half, they don't look good one half, because I just frankly think they're an average offense. I don't think they're a top 5 unit like they've been the last 5 years. And of course, you and I are going to disagree on that. You're
average. Average is insane to me, considering that they literally moved the ball at will against the Steelers, and with 3 red zone turnovers, had 20 points and got the game-winning touchdown. Yeah, 20 points on face level doesn't look impressive, but without your starting tackle for half the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road in Sunday Night Football with 3 red zone turnovers, like, you do the math there. Even if you averaged 4 points per drive in that stretch of those 3 turnovers, that's a 32-point performance.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Like, I think the other part of it, though, is that they also like turn the ball over at inopportune times. Yeah. I just think that's what average, like, you're gonna be pissed, but that's what average offenses do. They're gonna turn the ball over at stupid times. They're gonna, not convert in the red zone, which I've heard you talk about the Cowboys too. So for me, I just look at it as like CeeDee Lamb needs to play first team all pro caliber CeeDee Lamb like he was the last 10 games of last season to be the 101 rest of season. I just frankly don't think he's gonna play at that level, considering Chase, St. Brown, Jefferson. Throw in Saquon Barkley or whoever else at running back that you'd maybe want to throw in if we were redrafting today, who you would take over CeeDee Lamb. For me, again, I view him as kind of like that mid-first round asset if we redrafted today. I think he's probably more destined to be a top 5 receiver as opposed to like the 101 overall. So that's kind of just where I'm at with it. I think most people understand that CeeDee Lamb's a very good asset, a mid-first round type of dude if we redrafted today, and maybe they're less likely to sell him for that reason, but there's always going to be pumpkins in your league that are willing to sell him for Josh Jacobs and JSN or whatever. Anyways, we're going to totally disagree on Cowboy stuff. Maybe you guys have already shut this video off at this point in time. We just went like 9 minutes on the Dallas Cowboys and CeeDee Lamb, but maybe you enjoyed this. I don't know. Arguing about Cowboy stuff is something that I always think is terrible entertainment, but for some reason you guys
people
seem to
love
like it.
People love
it. CeeDee Lamb, goodbye if your leagues are full of pumpkins. I generally think he's about worth his current value on the open market, but it depends kind of what your league is looking at. And the other thing is, too, like if you are a 4-1 team or a 5-0 team, you have some overperforming players, maybe like DK Metcalf, for example, has had a bunch of good weeks in a row.
Godwin was in one of those deals. Like Godwin.
Yeah, Godwin. Anybody that has had pretty good performances so far, you might be able to use to tier up to CeeDee Lamb. And again, of course, those deals make sense. It's just a matter of how your league is valuing CeeDee Lamb. So speaking of, players that are underperforming maybe relative to their talent level, Breece Hall is my number 1 buy. We've talked about him on a couple different videos, I believe, so far this year. I just want to outline the timeline for Breece Hall, and the reason I still have him as like a top 6 redraft pick if we were to redraft today. An offense with like infighting, first of all, and terrible vibes that just fired their head coach has had this guy producing as an RB1 the first 3 games of the season. In week 4, they have a game against Denver, one of the best defenses in the league, the 5th hardest matchup for fantasy running backs in awful weather, by the way. And Breece Hall has a bad game. Okay. Not a huge deal. It was a bad game against a good defense. But again, the offense doesn't look great right now in New York. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. The offensive line specifically just looks soft and they can't get any push. Week 5, they go to London. Again, the weather's not great. It's raining during that game. And they face the Vikings, who are the 4th hardest running back matchup in the league. So with how bad the vibes are with the New York Jets are right now, and how, you can point to stuff that is Breece Hall's fault. Like he is not, playing at a high level as far as like
he's missing some cutback lanes. Like I saw like a Jets account on YouTube, like broke down like every rush of his game against the Vikings. And there were just missed opportunities that was making last year, that he was hitting last year. Like he just simply hasn't been making. Now, it comes back like similar to CeeDee Lamb in the sense that we know that these guys are elite talents. And even if they're not playing at their full capacity yet, Breece Hall, like CeeDee Lamb, we know Breece Hall isn't suddenly just this terrible running back that all these metrics are going to point him to be.
Yeah, well, not to mention, like, for 3 weeks starting the season, he was a top 12 running back in every single game. So even if you would say, like, oh, he's not having as good
without the efficiency either.
Exactly. He's not having the efficiency. We haven't really seen him break off like a long touchdown, which we know Breece Hall is capable of doing. So again, maybe Robert Saleh was the reason that Aaron Rodgers was underperforming or the offensive line was underperforming. Maybe they go get Devontae Adams, which could also improve the offense. I would say they're definitely the betting favorite to go get him. Maybe they just improve because it's, you know, a new quarterback, new O-line pieces. And as the season goes along, now that maybe the person that they didn't want in the locker room is gone, they start to play at a higher level. I can't really point to anything one specific that says Breece Hall is going to have a better second half of the season than so far what he's done. I just believe in the kid's ability. I believe in the receiving touches. I believe in the workload. I mean, he's been over 71% of the snaps in every single game. He's still getting an elite RB1 level workload. Well, everybody is panicking about Breece Hall. And I would venture a guess to say that most people would value him as like a mid to low end RB1. And that's even if they're still maybe even a little optimistic about him. I've seen people say I traded him away for, you know, whoever running back that they think is a better projection rest of the season. Some people are probably trading him away for David Montgomery's and Jordan Mason's and James Connors right now. And to me, that is just such egregious overreaction on Breece Hall to the point that I'm trading for this guy. If you can get him for Brian Robinson, Deontay Johnson, Travis Etienne, Jordan Mason, like these type of deals that you guys can see on the screen, it is just, you have to be buying him. Like I would love to talk about new players that we haven't talked about in trade targets videos so far this year. But the reality is he's the best buy low of any running back in fantasy right now. So we have to talk about him.
Yeah, no, and again, that's what it comes back to because people are almost sick of Breece Hall at this point, and they're going to look at, like you said, the Saleh firing, and they're going to be like, well, Saleh was the only guy that was saying, yeah, Breece Hall's our workhorse on a week-to-week basis. Like, if you guys follow Coach Speak Index, it was always Saleh, like, relax Braylon Allen, like, Breece Hall's our superstar. Maybe people are thinking, like, with no Saleh there, maybe Ulbrich ends up going to a committee approach. That's not going to happen. That's not how the NFL works. First of all, again, I view it as a net positive, even if Ulbrich is not a better head coach than Robert Saleh. It's clear as day that Robert Saleh's message in the locker room was not getting across to those professionals. And we've seen it time and time again. Even if the new head coach, the new interim coach, is not a pure better candidate for the head coaching job than the previous head coach, a new energy in a locker room brings so much out of those guys. And we saw the humiliating loss in London against Minnesota. I'm telling you right now, I'm taking the Jets to upset the Bills this upcoming week.
Yeah, well, and we even see it with quarterback changes too. Like, look what we saw in Carolina a couple weeks ago when Bryce Young was no longer the starter and they go to Andy Dalton. Like a new voice, whether it's quarterback, head coach, whatever, can just galvanize an offense. And maybe that was the reason the Jets' offensive line was underperforming relative to the talent they had. Maybe it's the reason that Aaron Rodgers was getting frustrated with Garrett Wilson. Maybe it's the reason that Breece Hall wasn't running efficiently. Again, it's super gutalyticsy and vibes based to say that, but I really do think it's going to end up materializing over the next couple of weeks. And I would be kicking myself right now if I didn't have that feeling and I wasn't telling you guys actively to go send as many fucking offers for Breece Hall as you possibly can.
Well, and I think that's the biggest problem with fantasy analysis nowadays is people want proof for every single thing that's already happened. But you have to take stances in fantasy. You have to take stances in players that are going to simply start performing better moving forward. If you did it after week 2 with Jamar Chase, you're probably sitting pretty right now. Understanding elite talents that are underperforming but project better moving forward is the biggest advantage that you can have across the rest of your leagues because people are going to naturally have pessimism when an asset they expect to perform simply isn't performing. Panic starts setting in for a lot of people because they would rather the certainty of the player that is performing at that current moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, we're not going to talk about Bijan, but he's a very similar situation where the offense is playing better, but it's not, you know, materializing as far as his production is concerned. He's definitely one of these guys as well that you should be definitely going out and sending offers for, because if people are valuing him as a low end RB1 or high end RB2 or whatever, again, am I going to go out and say that Bijan's the RB1 rest of the season in my rankings? No, I'm a little bit concerned about how he's playing right now. I'm a little bit concerned about the workload, but I'm generally optimistic relative to the landscape of fantasy football players across the board. And that's kind of where I'm at with Breece Hall, with Bijan Robinson. Again, sometimes fantasy football is mainly psychology. And if you thought of like some of the guys we talked about last week, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Garrett Wilson, all had monster games. And it was just because they hadn't done it yet that nobody thought they were going to. And now that they've done it, like if you would have traded for Drake London, Garrett Wilson, or Brandon Ayuk last week, they're probably low-end wide receiver 2s on the open market. You try and trade for them now, I bet you they're valued as wide receiver 1s.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the psychology portion. And again, I am always an open market with every team in my league. But I'm telling you right now, when I know I'm going to be making trade offers out, especially before this video comes out in a lot of my leagues, because some people do end up watching them, but I digress. I look at the teams that are at this point going into week 6. who's 0-5, who's 1-4, who's 2-3, who's facing a bunch of bye weeks this week, who absolutely needs a win. And I'm going to potentially get a player that's unavailable to them. Like, for example, I mean, we could talk about if you're in a winning position, like Nico Collins just got put on IR today, go buy him. Yeah. And I mean, a guy that is potentially coming off of IR and is my second buy at the wide receiver position, it's Cooper Kupp, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Rams. Like I said, if the person who drafted Cooper Kupp is in a position where they're 4-1 and 5-0, I mean, kudos to them. More than likely, the person that drafted Cooper Kupp at the end of the third round or possibly even earlier in your draft is in a situation now where they're 1-4, they're 2-3, they need W's right now. They have the uncertainty of when Cooper Kupp's going to come back. They have the uncertainty with the knowledge that he's not going to be performing in their week 5 lineup at the very minimum, knowing that the Rams are on bye. I'm not saying that Cooper Kupp is the most appealing buy in terms of how you're going to feel buying him. It's not for the faint of heart. However, when it comes to Cooper Kupp, the moment he comes back to fantasy, the moment he comes back to the LA Rams, he is a wide receiver one in my rankings. I mean, we saw what he was able to do in the one game he was fully healthy this year because he was the wide receiver 2 overall in fantasy with 32 PPR points. We've already got reports from Schefter that he is expected to return after their bye week. And like I said, if you are in a winning position in your league right now, just go and gauge what the price of Cooper Kupp is. Can you get Cooper Kupp right now, straight up for any of these guys? Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, Devontae Smith, even Stephon Diggs. With the news of Nico Collins, if you have Stephon Diggs, I wouldn't be shocked if you could offer him straight up for Cooper Kupp right now.
Yeah, and I think, again, a lot of those guys, like, for what it's worth, I have Mike Evans and Devontae Smith, of the names that you listed, ranked ahead of Cooper Kupp rest of season, because you also have to factor in, I mean, Deepak lists here that the data favors a week 7 to 8 return for Cooper Kupp, which means that you're probably getting a guy who's going to be back on the field within the next 2 to 3 weeks. But you're also looking at the fact that he's an older receiver, has some moderate re-injury risk coming back from the injury. So again, for me, Mike Evans, Devontae Smith, a little steep, but if you can get it, Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore, somebody like that, that actually makes a lot of sense for those of you guys that are in a winning position. If you're 4-1, if you're 5-0, if you're even 3-2 with a lot of points for, and the guy that has Cooper Kupp is 0-5, 1-4, 2-3 with not a lot of points for, then again, you're playing the psychology. It's like you're playing the man rather than you're playing the player, because Cooper Kupp, we kind of know exactly what he is. In that one game that we saw, anytime he's been healthy the last couple of years, he's an elite receiver and he gets a lot of targets. And Matthew Stafford will absolutely pepper the shit out of him. And Puka Nacua is probably not going to be back on the field at least until like week 9 through week 11. So you're going to get a couple games really where Cooper Kupp could really, really spike in value. And even if you're concerned about the re-injury risk, you might be able to flip him for somebody a lot easier after week 9 or week 10 when he's already had like 3 games in a row of over 20 PPR points before Puka's back.
Exactly. And there's 2 psychological narratives to every single player based off how they're doing. For Cooper Kupp, after week 1, oh my God, this guy's the 101 rest of the season. How do we overthink it? 21 targets, high-powered Rams offense, that connection with Stafford. I mean, heck, they were having breakfast together all offseason the last 4 years. How do we miss that? Now the psychology is, oh, he's the older wide receiver that hasn't played since week 1. Like, being able to take advantages of those psychological narratives that people build into their minds. Like you said, as soon as Cooper Kupp comes back and has a 20-point week, everybody's going to forget about the time he missed.
No, literally. And like the biggest edge in fantasy just in general is being properly reactive as opposed to being overreactive to what happens or underreacting to what happens. So we talk about that all the time. Another one of these guys that I think is, again, it's almost just like a vibes-based buy for me. And I know that's like not maybe what you guys want to hear, but I'm telling you right now, I just refuse to believe that Sam LaPorta is going to be useless the rest of the season. Like, I just refuse to believe it. He led the position in touchdowns his rookie year. He had a top 4 receiving grade. He was top 5 in yards and top 6 in yards per run. Is that guy just going to go away and fade into oblivion because Jameson Williams decided to break out? And that's probably been the primary reason for it. He's just been flat out unproductive. He's not playing at a high level right now. He's been banged up with a low ankle sprain that he suffered, I believe, in week 3. He needs to play better. Like, I don't know what else to say about Sam LaPorta. He is 14th in receiving grade right now. He's 18th in yards per out run, but he's still in a top 3 offense in the NFL, potentially the best one in the league. He's top 3 in yards per reception when he does get targets this year. The offense is crowded. We know this. St. Brown eats. Jameson Williams makes big plays. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are how they like to run their offense, and they're probably the best backfield tandem in the NFL. The Lions have a 49ers-like feel to them where you just want pieces of it, but you don't know how to get there. You're like, I just want Amon-Ra. I'm going to just throw him into my lineup every week. I just want Sam LaPorta. I just want to throw him into my lineup. Like, you don't know who's going to get there on any given game, but you know a couple of them are because the offense is good enough for it to happen. LaPorta just had the bye week. He can get a little bit healthier if that was the issue for him, the low ankle sprain that he suffered. He's got the Cowboys on the schedule this week, the Vikings, the Packers, the Texans, and the Jaguars. 5 of his next 6 games. Those are high-scoring game environments that are going to have 48+ point over-unders. And if he starts playing like
that might even be underselling it, by the way. 48+.
Exactly. If he just starts playing like his rookie year, I have hope that Sam LaPorta, who's been under 10 PPR points in every game this year, we're just going to look back at that and be like, how do we not? This guy was drafted tight end 1 for a reason. I think the process was totally behind it. It would not have shocked any of us if Sam LaPorta was far and away the best tight end in fantasy through for the first 4 games. Would it have shocked any of us?
Maybe not. There's one caveat I have, and it's how this offense runs. Because the thesis for LaPorta coming into the year is that we knew Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to command targets. We knew they were going to run the football, but he was clear as day going to be the number 2 receiving weapon on this team. And I still think he's the number 2, but seeing Jameson Williams play as good as he has been makes him a factor moving forward. Even if we don't think Jameson Williams is going to be the most consistent factor.
I don't doubt that he is. I just think that there's a George Kittle feel to Sam LaPorta where there's games that George Kittle does nothing. We all know this, right? Like Debo got the touchdowns that game. Ayuk had the big plays that game, whatever. I just think the reason that you can get LaPorta for a good price right now is because, as we know with George Kittle, you have a couple bad games in a row. What's coming? The 30 bomb. And I think that Sam LaPorta's 30 bomb is coming.
And I agree with that regard too. The other factor I'm a little bit concerned of is we know as soon as they're inside the 10, they're inside the 5. Like Goff is not throwing the football. That's where I come back to. And so I don't know if he has
there on efficiency and big plays and maybe some red zone touchdowns as well.
So where I come back to with LaPorta again, like we initially had this as the conjoint buy. We switched this to your buy because I have a little bit more pessimism with LaPorta. Not that I don't think he's a very solid top 7 projection at the tight end position. Again, I think you can even make the case with him higher, but I think at the very minimum, 7 tight ends at this point have really established themselves. Kelsey, Bowers, McBride, Ferguson, Kittle, Kraft, LaPorta, I think.
There's absolutely zero chance I would take Jake Ferguson over Sam LaPorta. Sam LaPorta is top 5 tight end for me the rest of the season because I know that Sam LaPorta's big games are coming. That's why.
Jake Ferguson has commanded targets and he's the clear number 2 in his offense.
He has. Yeah. There's target commanding tight ends that don't finish as top 5 fantasy options every single year. There's Cole Kmet.
I think you're just
every year.
See, like comparing Jake Ferguson to Cole Kmet is outrageous. Like I'm not sure if you've watched Jake Ferguson play. Jake Ferguson's a lot better than
he's looked good.
Like I think he's like I said, a fringe top 5 level talent at the tight end position. He is that good.
Yeah, again, I think when we're talking about the tight end position, I know it's a position that inherently, outside of maybe a couple special seasons every few years, you're never getting consistency out of this position. It just rarely ever happens like that. So for me, I want the guy with the super, super monster weekly ceiling. And to me, like Ferguson,
why doesn't Ferguson have that though?
He does. He did it in last year's playoffs, actually. He had a monster game. But I think that LaPorta has got like 6 monster games in the chamber for him rest of the season. And we haven't seen one yet, which is why I think he's one of the best buys in fantasy. And at the second, if he had 30 fantasy points this week, everybody's firing him right up to a top 3 tight end rest of the season. And at the very least, that gives you a selling window if you wanted to buy LaPorta and sell him right after.
Yeah, I mean, like, see, like the only thing I disagree with is like I feel like you're being harsh on Ferguson. I think it's fine if you wanted to say you prefer LaPorta, but saying that Ferguson doesn't even deserve to be in the discussion, I think is outrageous considering he's commanded 7+ targets in the last 3 games. He hasn't even scored a touchdown yet this year, and Dak has 8 on the season, which is, I believe, tied for 3rd in the NFL. Like, it's gonna come. It's going to come from a touchdown.
That's fair. I'm looking at a guy who had 144 targets his rookie season. Like, there's no way that Jake Ferguson has a higher ceiling than that player.
Ferguson has 30 in the 4 games he's played in.
Yeah, he's been good. He's definitely a solidified set it and forget it tight end rest of the season. I just think Sam LaPorta has a chance to still be an elite positional advantage. We just haven't seen it yet. And
that's fine. The reason why I'm saying that is that because there's 7 tight ends that I can make a case of being above or below each other. I think at this point, Kelsey, Bowers, McBride kind of separated as the top 3.
I think those 3 are the only ones I can comfortably say are ahead of LaPorta. I think you can make the argument that Kittle and LaPorta are exactly the same projection.
Well, and that's kind of the point I was getting to, is because I think I agree. Those top 3 have completely established themselves. I think the next tier for me is Ferguson, Kittle, Kraft, LaPorta, and I think you can argue any one of those guys either way. That's how I view it.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I'm personally actively sending out offers for Sam LaPorta in my home league because the manager that has LaPorta is 1-4 right now. So I am sending out some offers. I have Kraft, who obviously just had 2 really big games. To me, I view it as a tier up. If I can get from Kraft to LaPorta, I will do it.
See, I don't. I mean, I guess another factor too. I mean, it's underrated, but LaPorta already did have his bye. So if you're talking about within a tier and you want to target the guy that's already had his bye, I think that makes a ton of sense. But what I'm basically at is because we have 7 guys we're confident in, what's the price tag that we're paying for? Because I would rather get the 7th guy at the cheapest cost than I would have to pay for the 4th guy.
The other thing, and the people that are actually targeting LaPorta for the most part don't have one of those 7 guys. They probably drafted Pitts, or they drafted Njoku, or they picked up Likely after week 4, or maybe they want to grab Dallas, like they had Dallas Goedert and they want to upgrade
Dalton
from him
Kincaid?
or something like that. Yeah, Dalton Kincaid's not really performing at the highest level right now. For me, I think that the people going after LaPorta are someone who doesn't, like, you're not going after LaPorta if you have Bowers. Like, I'm not suggesting that. If you have even Ferguson, I don't even think you need to go after LaPorta necessarily. I'm saying if you don't have a tight end right now, you should go after LaPorta because he might be an elite one at a discount. This is a very argumentative episode of Trade Targets, but you know what? This might be a lot more fun for you guys to listen to. We don't have to disagree or agree on every single thing we talk about. One thing we do agree on, at least I think we do, is that T. Higgins is a pretty good buy high right now. The reason I think he's a great buy high is because even though he just posted a top 5 week, 29.3 PPR points per game, the stigma of T. Higgins being this like hamstring pilled, injury riddled receiver still exists. And T. Higgins, as a result, is being ranked as a top 24 wide receiver on our expert consensus over on Flock Fantasy. And I would imagine in a lot of people's leagues, they're looking for a sell high window on this guy because they don't trust him. They don't think he's going to produce the rest of the season. The reason I trust T. Higgins is because he's playing like T. Higgins of old. Yards per route run, PFF receiving grade, target share has improved every single game that he's played so far. The Bengals rank 2nd in neutral pass rate right now at 59%. And as I just discussed with Chase and some of the other guys that I've talked about, the Giants, Browns, Eagles, Raiders, Ravens, 5 of his next 6 games, lots of receiving production inbound for T. Higgins, in my opinion. If you can take any wide receiver 3 type, like Jackson Smith and Jigba, like Christian Kirk, some of these guys that have had half decent games in recent weeks, Michael Pittman, who we'll talk about in a second, go up and see if you can get to T. Higgins, because I legitimately think that you could make the argument that T. Higgins is a lot closer to Devontae Smith than people are giving him credit for right now. Devontae Smith, I think, consensus-wise, valued as a top 15 receiver rest of the season.
So I'm going to go a step further. So first of all, I have Devontae at 20, but I think that tier, honestly, like I have Brian Thomas probably more aggressively ranked than you do. He's my wide receiver 14 rest of the season, which I don't think
I have him at 18, which is also, for what it's worth, 4 spots higher than the rest of the experts on the site have him.
Yeah, so I'm way ahead of the experts. By the way, the fact that they have him as low as they do, considering he's already the wide receiver 9 in his rookie season, I don't know. We don't have to get into the semantics of it. Point being, though, is what do you think the price discrepancy is between Higgins and Olave on the market right now? Because I think I would rather have Higgins rest of the season.
I mean, maybe it'll adjust itself after the Derek Carr news, but I would easily rather have Higgins.
Same. So Chris Olave, again, this is a separate discussion, but I had him as the wide receiver 12 in my wide receiver rankings going into last week because I thought he would separate himself from Rashid Shaheed. And if anything, we actually saw the inverse happen. So I am more nervous about Olave moving forward than I even gave credit to.
Yeah, I think there's a clear top of the number 2 receiver totem pole. And it's, Devontae Smith and Chris Godwin, and maybe you throw Diggs in there now that Nico is banged up, and those type of guys. Brandon Ayuk, Ayuk is the one there, so I have Debo as the 2.
No, I know, but I thought you meant in the wide receiver 2 rankings of fantasy guys, because I don't think you can make the case.
No, guys who are number 2s on their team. I mean, Devontae Smith, Chris Godwin, Stephon Diggs, those type of guys, because Collins is going to be out for a couple of weeks. I think Higgins is right there with those guys. I think he's ahead of the Debos of the world. I think he's ahead of the JSNs of the world, guys who are clear number 2s on their team, but aren't quite as good, at least for fantasy, as T. Higgins. Because the other thing is, Burrow's playing really well. They need to win games. They're going to be desperate to win games. T. Higgins, of course, coming into the year, I really liked him because of the whole contract year narrative, and he needs to play at a high level to get paid. And I think that is going to play itself out in the rest of the season. I think that we're going to see, we can piece together T. Higgins as a wide receiver 1 arguments over the last couple of years based on the games that he's been healthy and things of that nature. But we're going to see it all come together this year, in my opinion. I think he's playing at a super high level right now. He's a top 15 graded receiver on PFF.
He's a contextualized game log staple.
He is. He literally is. And I think that we won't have to contextualize the game logs for once. I think we're getting a back end wide receiver 1 high and wide receiver 2 season over the course of the year. And I have Chase ranked as my 101 rest of the season. So I realize how good Chase is. I just think the offense is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think the Bengals offense at this point looks like they could potentially win leagues. Burrow's playing obviously well. Chase doing his own thing, but T. Higgins quietly
is horrible too. So
T. Higgins quietly in the last 3 weeks, if you compare his target share to Jamar Chase since he returned from injury. Week 3, Chase had an 18% target share. Higgins had a 16% target share. Week 4, Higgins had a 32% target share. Chase had an 18% target share. Week 5, Higgins had a 34% target share. Chase has had a 32% target share. So he's actually out-targeted Chase. Now, obviously, we know what Chase brings to the table. Yak game, like that's why he's 101. But Higgins, don't say he's going to get alpha by Chase because, in fact, it's actually been the inverse so far since he's come back.
Yeah, no, it has been. And I brought up Michael Pittman as a guy that you could maybe go from Pittman to Higgins, sorry. Yeah. And I think that is one of the best sell highs in fantasy right now. And I actually did sell him high in my home league. Joe Flacco came in for, a game and a half, I guess, second half of the week 4 game. And then last week, of course, he started against the Jaguars and he did Joe Flacco things. He de-gaffs it. He throws it all over the yard. Pittman, who's in a very crowded wide receiver core where all 3 players have their own unique abilities. Josh Downs has actually out-targeted him when healthy this year. Adonai Mitchell, when he's on the field, earns targets. Alec Pierce is the big play guy, taking away some of the offensive production there. They're all now at the mercy of Anthony Richardson and the 10, maybe 15 passes he's going to complete every single game.
He is the worst stylistic fit for them with Anthony Richardson as well, knowing that Downs is your slot guy. Like you said, AD, Alec Pierce bringing the big plays. Like Pittman is your throwback possession wide receiver.
He's the guy that you're, fundamentally sound, step up in the pocket, deliver a layered throw quarterback is going to like. But that's not who Richardson is.
Like, dude, if you told me him and Jawan Jennings switched spots in San Francisco, Michael Pittman would go crazy over there.
Yeah, no, he would. Yeah. And again, I think it speaks a lot to Michael Pittman that a second Joe Flacco's in there, he's going to produce. And that's maybe something you'd factor into like not wanting to sell Michael Pittman because Richardson is like a rushing quarterback who seems to be, injured a lot. But use Michael Pittman's solid recent outings. The fact that he was 17.3 PPR points in week 4, 14.7 this past week, use those to tier up. And again, maybe you don't want to do this because this is admittedly something that's a little bit risky, but the trade that I ended up making where I sold off Michael Pittman, I got Romo Dunze from D Bell in my league. And the reason I made the trade is because, yes, I have now acquired Romo Dunze twice this week. Pittman was my wide receiver 5 behind JSN, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, and Drake London. So for me, he was not even a starter in my lineup like most weeks, unless I had bye weeks or injuries or whatever. So for me, I was looking for the long-term play, the guy that could end up being a top 3 receiver for me on my roster any given week, send JSN or T. Higgins to the bench, probably JSN at this point in time. And to me, Romo Dunze has that ability. So I was taking an upside swing on a guy that I already had a very good wide receiver core for. But if you do have Michael Pittman, the guys that I would target are, maybe if you want an upside swing like an Odunze, a Worthy, a McConkey, maybe people are not hip to Brian Thomas yet and you could somehow get up to him, but there's a good chance people are. Maybe go after JSN, maybe go after Jalen Waddle if you're looking for a long-term play. You already mentioned Cooper Kupp as a long-term play. Maybe Puka Nacua if you're a little bit less worried about him. Maybe you want to go after Chris Olave if the market reaction is he's going to be terrible now that Derek Carr is hurt. So there's guys that you can use Michael Pittman and go up and get. And I think given that Joe Flacco is not going to start games, at least, for the short term, Michael Pittman has to be a sell high right now.
Yeah, I agree with you with Pittman. At this point, there's more, potential hopium that Flacco could start more games moving forward because he just started his last game. I'm telling you right now, in 2-3 weeks time,
like they have no choice.
But that's what I mean. I'm telling you in 2-3 weeks time, once Anthony Richardson is back and people are kind of dispelled from the, is Flacco going to play at all for the rest of the season narrative that's going on right now, Pittman's value is going to go down. So if in the next few weeks, as soon as Anthony Richardson starts,
he's going to play this week. He's not even the next week. He's going to be playing this week.
But that's what I mean. Like the sentiment right now is like, could Flacco step in if he struggles, or could Flacco step in at any point? Maybe I don't want to sell him. If that narrative exists right now, and we know it will be dispelled, if not after this week, at the very minimum after the next couple of weeks, this is the prime opportunity to sell Pittman.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's rattle off the last one here. You got Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers, which, I mean, we're Canadians, so this one hurts us.
Yeah, no disrespect for my Canadian brother. Obviously, he's been unbelievable in Carolina thus far, but Jonathan Brooks is expected to be activated off the PUP within the next 2 weeks. If it's not this week, it's going to be by next week. He actually didn't make the timeline last week, so sounds like by all accounts, they're taking it cautious, but also with that being said, he is going to be off the pup sooner rather than later. And Chuba Hubbard is currently the RB7 overall in fantasy football. I'm telling you right now, you guys are probably in sharper leagues and thinking, oh, like, there's no way I'm going to be able to sell Chuba Hubbard for RB7 lower price tags. I'm not saying you're going to be selling him for the RB7 overall. However, when we read the tea leaves of the situation for Carolina, they are a rebuilding team, arguably the worst overall team in the NFL. As a rebuilding team, they traded up into the second round to take the consensus RB1 in the class. Does that tell you that as soon as he comes back, he's just going to be the backup to Chuba Hubbard, despite Chuba Hubbard playing well? Or what does that tell you is young team, they just traded up for this guy. They want to see what he could do on an NFL football field, especially coming off of that injury. I lean the latter. Again, Chuba Hubbard, I think, is a very good contingent play, very good high implied upside play in the sense that going forward, if Brooks were to miss any time, you can plug him right in your lineup. But like, I view him more so in like the Braylon Allen, the Tyler Algier frame of mind, in the sense that he is an implied play. And as soon as Jonathan Brooks comes back, the standalone value will decrease. And a lot of leagues that are reactive, they see Chuba Hubbard last 3 weeks, last 4 weeks, 11.6, 27.9, 22.1, 19.5 PPR points. The guy's been a top 10 running back in each of the last 3 weeks. If you can sell him off of the assumption, like you maybe even you can picture the narrative to this person that's 1-4, 2-3 needs production right now. Hey, like, why would they sit Chuba Hubbard when Jonathan Brooks comes back if Chuba Hubbard's been this good? There's a lot of narratives you can switch.
He's going to need to ramp up for 3-4 games before he's getting a workload, whatever. And like, that's probably true, but we're also, we're telling you to sell Hubbard as in, you know, he's probably going to be really good for like one more game, I would imagine. And then even if Brooks is on the field and not getting a workhorse role, it's going to impact Chuba Hubbard's role. And that's going to make him less valuable. And the second we see usage that he's a 40% snap share player, your buying window is now gone.
100%. So that's where we're at with Chuba Hubbard. Again, I don't expect you to get RB7 overall price tags, but production is production. And if people are struggling for production right now, let's just say, I mean, like Rico Dowdle's not a good example because he's actually produced the last couple of weeks, but point blank, like a running back they drafted to be their RB2 simply hasn't been producing. They're going to be eyeing Chuba Hubbard. I'm going to tell you that for free.
Yeah, maybe they're interested in like, you know, they drafted McCaffrey and McCaffrey is obviously not playing. You can use Chuba Hubbard plus to go after McCaffrey if you're in a winning position.
They lost Zach Moss.
Yeah, maybe you're interested in Joe Mixon or Josh Jacobs, guys who have been injured or maybe not producing at a high level. You could go after those guys using Chuba Hubbard. I mean, I traded Chuba Hubbard away, 2 weeks ago in our listener league, and I used him to get up to James Cook, which is exactly what I would use Chuba Hubbard to do as well.
Another prime example. Again, if you have Chuba Hubbard, you're probably in a winning position right now, given the production he's been given to your team. Can you add Chuba Hubbard on top of insert wide receiver 2, like Devontae Smith,
Pittman,
something like that? Well, I was going to say like a little bit higher because I was going to say Nico Collins. Like, can you work up, like, say the person that has Nico Collins, he's on IR for the next 4 weeks. Can you use like a guy that's in the top 15, top 18 at wide receiver plus a Chuba Hubbard to go work up there? Gauge the level in your league, because I think if Chuba Hubbard, the best way I would approach him is not necessarily selling him straight up as the player he is, but using him as a sweetener in a package to tier up at another spot, like I said. So if it's Devontae Smith plus Chuba Hubbard gets you Nico Collins, you put him on IR, and you know when he comes back, he's going to be a 20-plus point per game player. Like, that's more valuable to you in the long term if you're 4-1, 5-0, than just a solid RB2 projection until Jonathan Brooks comes back.
Yeah, which is precisely why I traded him as a sweetener to get up to James Cook, who I view as a more viable long-term play for the rest of the season. So I know this one was a little bit longer. Again, appreciate you guys for sticking around here. If you have any trade targets, trade questions, feel free to leave them down below. We do have a trade calculator on our site. So if you want our specific opinions on your trades, you don't even actually really have to ask us. You can use our trade calculator, get my specific opinion when you go through, get Danny's specific opinion when you go through. If you follow a lot of us like Mason and Zach and Madaka and all of us, you can get all of our opinions by using the expert function. That's actually free over on our trade calculator. So if you want to go check that out, link down below in the pinned comment for that, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE gets you 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages, and 6 months for free. When you sign up annually, you also get a free voucher for a team review from one of us if you guys sign up annually over there. And our rest of season rankings are up to date, dynasty rankings, all that stuff. So you guys can check out all the good stuff we got going on over there. Like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe. If you enjoyed the content you found here, comment any of your thoughts down below. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.